On September 6, 2010, a blue jay and a raccoon sit on a couch in a room with a hole punched clean through the wall, and the raccoon holds up a stolen keyboard he found in a bush, and the blue jay names it the Power. And within 11 minutes of that very first episode, the two of them have been launched to the edge of the known universe. That is the pilot. That is the premise. Two slackers who cannot stop turning the smallest possible problem into a cosmic event. But 8 seasons, 244 episodes, and one sacrifice at the center of a dying star later, something happened that nobody expected from a show about avoiding yard work. It became one of the most honest depictions of growing up that American animation has ever produced. And that is what this video is really about. Not just the lore, not just the episodes, but the lessons buried inside them. The ones that do not announce themselves. The ones that sit quietly inside a joke about a haunted VHS tape or a sentient hot dog and wait for you to get old enough to understand them. If you have not already, subscribing to this channel genuinely helps more than you know, and it means we get to keep making these long videos for you. So now, with that out of the way, let us begin with the lesson Regular Show spent its entire run trying to teach, the one it circles back to in almost every season, the one it dramatizes through magical keyboards and death-bowling and enchanted omelets and arm wrestling matches against the Grim Reaper himself. The lesson is deceptively simple. You have to do the work. Not because the work is glamorous, not because the reward is guaranteed, but because avoiding it will always cost you more than doing it ever could. That idea sits at the foundation of everything Regular Show builds across its run from 2010 to 2017. And it starts in the most literal way possible. Mordecai, a 23-year-old blue jay voiced by creator J.G. Quintel, and Rigby, a 23-year-old raccoon voiced by William Salyers, are groundskeepers at a public park managed by a sentient gumball machine named Benson Dunwoody. Their job is not complicated. Rake the leaves, set up the chairs, mow the lawn, clean the fountain, and yet in nearly every episode across all 8 seasons, the central conflict begins because one or both of them chose not to do the thing they were supposed to do. The show establishes this pattern immediately. In the very second episode, Just Set Up the Chairs, which aired on September 13, 2010, the task could not be more straightforward. There is a birthday party at the park. Benson assigns everyone a job. Skip sets up the bouncy castle, Muscle Man and High Five Ghost handle the entertainment, Mordecai and Rigby have to set up chairs, folding chairs. That is all. And they complain. They call it mediocre. They wander off to find additional chairs and stumble upon an old arcade cabinet called Destroyer of Worlds, and within minutes the park is under siege from a digital monster. The birthday party is ruined. The park is damaged, and Benson, standing amid the wreckage, tells them the one thing they cannot argue with. He cannot even trust them to set up chairs. That is the formula. That is the engine. A simple task avoided, an absurd consequence unleashed, and a lesson embedded so deeply in the comedy that you almost do not notice you are learning it. The show does this with such consistency and such creativity across its 244 episodes that by the time you have watched a few dozen of them, the pattern starts to feel less like a plot device and more like a philosophy. Avoidance is expensive. Responsibility is not punishment. And the distance between a small problem and a catastrophic one is almost always measured by the amount of time someone spent pretending the small problem did not exist. In the Season 1 episode Death Punchies, the 4th episode of the entire series, which aired on September 20th, 2010, the task is simple. They need to work. But Rigby cannot stop playing punchies with Mordecai. Again, he always loses, and instead of accepting the loss or walking away, Rigby goes to a strip mall martial arts studio to learn a technique called the Death Punch of Death. The escalation from there is absurd. Rigby gains terrifying power. He forgets why he wanted it. He rampages through the park, destroying everything he touches. Mordecai has to learn a countermove to stop him. The entire episode functions as a parable about what happens when you channel your energy into resentment instead of resolution. Rigby does not want to be better at his job. He does not want to improve. He wants to win. And the show, even in its 4th episode, already knows the difference between those two things. What makes this more than a simple morality play is the way the show understands the emotional logic behind the avoidance. Rigby does not avoid work because he is lazy in some abstract characterological sense. He avoids it because the gap between what is asked of him and what he believes he is capable of feels insurmountable. The work itself is not hard. Setting up chairs is not hard. But doing work requires you to participate in a system that evaluates you. And participating in that system means risking the discovery that you are not good enough. For someone like Rigby, who carries the weight of having dropped out of high school, who has internalized the belief that he is less than everyone around him, Even raking a lawn becomes an existential threat. Because what if you rake the lawn wrong? What if you cannot even do that? That distinction runs like a wire through the entire series. And the show finds one of its most potent expressions of it in the season 1 episode Dawn, the 10th episode which aired on November 8th, 2010. The park is about to be audited, Pops, and his characteristic innocence has been paying taxes with lollipops, and the entire operation faces shutdown unless someone with actual accounting skills can sort the books. Mordecai suggests calling Rigby's younger brother Don. And the moment that name is spoken, something shifts in Rigby's posture, in his voice, in the way his entire body seems to contract around a wound the audience has not yet seen. Don arrives, and he is everything Rigby is not. He is tall, he is confident, he is warm and generous and immediately beloved by everyone at the park. He gives out hugs freely, he calls people by name, he fixes the tax problem within hours. The other park employees gravitate toward him with the kind of effortless admiration that Rigby has spent his entire life trying to earn and never receiving. And Rigby watches this happen with an expression that is not anger, exactly, but something closer to resignation. The look of someone who has seen this movie before and already knows the ending. A flashback reveals the origin. At Rigby's 6th birthday party, young Don unintentionally stole the attention of every guest. He was funnier, more charming, more physically impressive, even as a child. The other kids drifted toward Don the way planets drift toward a sun, and Rigby was left standing alone at his own party, holding a piece of cake no one offered to share, watching his brother become the center of a room that was supposed to belong to him. The episode could have played this as simple jealousy, as Rigby being petty and small, but it does not. It plays it as grief. Rigby is not angry at Don. He is heartbroken by the effortlessness of Don's success, because that effortlessness highlights in the cruelest possible way how hard everything is for Rigby. How hard it is to be liked. How hard it is to be competent. How hard it is to walk into a room and feel like you belong there. Don does not try to overshadow his brother. He does not even realize he is doing it. And that makes it worse, because you cannot fight something that is not being done to you on purpose. You cannot resent someone who is simply being themselves. You can only sit with the feeling that the universe distributed its gifts unevenly, and you were standing at the back of the line. The resolution comes when Don explains with genuine confusion and sadness that he gets his haircut like Rigby because he looks up to him. He does not wear clothes because Rigby does not wear clothes. He has been modeling himself after his older brother his entire life, and Rigby never saw it. He was so consumed by what Don had that he could not see what Don wanted, which was simply to be close to the brother he admired. The lesson is about perception and the way insecurity distorts it. When you feel inferior, you cannot see the people who look up to you. When you are convinced that you have nothing to offer, you become blind to the people who are already reaching for what you have. Rigby's insecurity is not just about his lack of education or his lack of discipline. It is about his inability to see his own value, and that inability poisons every relationship he touches, even the one with the brother who has been trying to love him from the very beginning. Consider, too, the Season 2 episode Do Me a Solid, the 18th episode of that season, which aired on May 2nd, 2011. The premise is small. Mordecai needs Rigby to do him a favor, a solid, so he can spend time with Margaret, the red-breasted robin who works at the local coffee shop. The episode establishes that solids are sacred in their friendship. You ask, the other person delivers, and you return the favor when the time comes. But Rigby exploits this. He racks up 10 solids against Mordecai, and the requests escalate from mildly annoying to genuinely humiliating. The consequences spiral outward, as they always do on this show, until the foundation of their friendship begins to crack under the weight of the exploitation. The lesson is not subtle, but it is real. Friendship requires reciprocity. It requires trust. And the moment one person starts keeping score to gain leverage, the friendship stops being a friendship and starts being a transaction. Rigby almost loses Mordecai over it, not because of a villain, not because of a supernatural catastrophe, because he treated generosity as a resource to be extracted rather than a gift to be honored. By the end of the episode, Rigby sees what his behavior has almost cost him and destroys the tape that held leverage over Mordecai. He chooses the friendship over the advantage. And that choice, made in an 11-minute cartoon about favors, contains more emotional wisdom than most hour-long dramas manage in an entire season. Now, the show delivers these lessons through chaos. That is its method. J.G. Quintel, who developed the series from 2 student films he made at the California Institute of the Arts, a short called The Naive Man from Lollyland in 2005 and another called 2 in the AM/PM in 2006, has spoken about how the show draws from the long empty afternoons of his youth in Hanford, California, a flat, quiet town where there was, in his words, not a ton to do. He and his friends were always looking for ways to entertain themselves, and that restless energy became the engine of regular show. Quintel was influenced by The Simpsons and Beavis and Butthead, by the surreal comedy of The Mighty Boosh, which he discovered through a British roommate at Cal Arts, and by the video game Toe Jam and Earl, which he described as the perfect platform for the dynamic between Mordecai and Rigby. The mundane becomes the mythic. A bet on a bowling game turns into a negotiation with the literal personification of death. A broken computer printer leads to a journey through the digital underworld. A failed attempt to return a sweater becomes a road trip that stretches into psychological odyssey. A bunch of baby ducks found in a park fountain end up forming a giant warrior to defeat a villainous duck collector. But underneath every escalation, there is a choice that started it, and that choice is almost always the same. Someone avoided doing the hard thing. Someone took the shortcut. Someone decided that the easy path was the smarter path, and the universe responded by proving, in the most dramatic terms possible, that it was not. The Season 2 episode A Bunch of Baby Ducks, which aired on June 6, 2011, offers a particularly gentle version of this dynamic. Mordecai and Rigby are tasked with cleaning the park fountain, and when they drain it, they find a group of baby ducks living inside. The ducks imprint on Rigby, following him everywhere, mimicking everything he does. And for a while, Rigby enjoys it. He likes being admired. He likes being followed. He likes being the center of attention without having to earn it. But then the duck's actual mother comes looking for them, and Rigby has to make a choice. He can keep the ducks, keep the admiration, keep the easy affection. Or he can let them go back to where they belong. Mordecai tells Rigby the truth. You can barely take care of yourself. How are you going to take care of a bunch of baby ducks? It is not a cruel statement. It is an honest one. And the honesty is the kindness. Because letting someone hold on to something they are not ready for is not generosity. It is enabling. Rigby lets the ducks go. And then, when a duck collector threatens them, the ducks themselves transform into a giant warrior and save everyone. The letting go does not end the relationship, it transforms it. The ducks become something greater because Rigby gave them the freedom to be. That is what happens when you love something enough to release your grip on it. This is what makes regular show fundamentally different from the other animated series that surrounded it on Cartoon Network during its run. Adventure Time explored grand mythology. Steven Universe interrogated identity and trauma. The Amazing World of Gumball deconstructed the sitcom form itself. Regular show did something quieter and, in its own way, more radical. It insisted that the most dangerous thing you can do with your life is refuse to participate in it, not refuse heroically. Just refuse. Just sit on the couch and play video games while the lawn grows wild and your boss screams himself into a medical event, and the girl at the coffee shop moves on to someone who actually had the courage to speak. That refusal and the slow, painful process of overcoming it is the emotional spine of the entire show. And no character embodies that arc more completely than Rigby. When the series begins, Rigby is, by almost any measure, the least functional person in the park. He does not have a high school diploma. This fact, revealed explicitly in the Season 2 episode More Smarter, which aired on June 13, 2011, is not presented as a joke. It is presented as a wound. In that episode, Mordecai mocks Rigby for his lack of education, and Rigby, rather than doing the work to actually learn, drinks an entire bottle of a dubious intelligence-boosting chemical called Brain Max. The directions say to take a measured dose. Rigby drinks the whole bottle because he wants it to work faster. The results are predictably catastrophic. Rigby becomes hyper-intelligent, then hyper-arrogant, then begins to physically mutate as the formula destabilizes. Mordecai drinks the same formula to keep up, and both of them nearly destroy the park in an escalating battle of synthetic intellect before the effects wear off and they are left exactly where they started. The metaphor is not hidden. There is no shortcut to becoming smarter. There is no pill that replaces the slow, difficult, humbling process of education. But the episode does something more interesting than just deliver that message. It shows why Rigby took the shortcut in the first place. He took it because he was ashamed. He took it because the gap between who he was and who he wanted to be felt so large that the only way to close it was to cheat. And that shame, that sense of fundamental inadequacy, is not something the show treats lightly. It follows Rigby for 5 more seasons. It shapes every relationship he has. It determines the trajectory of his entire arc. The Season 2 episode Temp Check, which aired on March 28, 2011, explores a related facet of this insecurity. Rigby hires a temporary worker named Doug Shablowski to do his job for him. Doug is friendly, enthusiastic, hardworking, everything Rigby is not. He wins over the other park employees immediately, and then Doug begins to change. He starts mimicking Rigby's appearance, his voice shifts, his mannerisms align. He is a shape-shifting con artist, the world's greatest doppelganger, and his scheme is to replace Rigby entirely, stealing his identity and his paycheck. The episode is funny on the surface, a body snatcher comedy played for laughs. But underneath, it asks a question that Rigby cannot answer. If someone can do your job better than you, if someone can be a more likable version of you, then what exactly is the value of the original? What makes you irreplaceable? The answer, it turns out, is something Doug cannot replicate. Doug copies Rigby's body, his voice, his mannerisms, but when Doug hugs Mordecai, the disguise fails, because Rigby would never hug Mordecai like that. Their friendship has a specific texture, a specific set of boundaries and unspoken rules that only the real Rigby knows. Your identity is not your skills or your appearance or your productivity. Your identity is the relationships you have built and the way you move inside them. That is what cannot be copied. That is what makes you you. The show returns to Rigby's relationship with inadequacy again and again, finding new angles, new textures, new ways to illuminate the same core wound. In the Season 6 episode Lift With Your Back, which aired on November 6, 2014, Rigby tries to prove that he can hold down a second job to earn extra money. The only position he can find is at a moving company, a physically demanding workplace run by a boss who insists that all heavy lifting be done exclusively with the back, not the legs. The back. It is terrible advice, medically absurd, the kind of instruction that would make a physical therapist weep. But Rigby follows it. He follows it because he is desperate to prove that his body, like his mind, is capable of something. He throws himself into the work with a ferocity that is painful to watch, hauling boxes up flights of stairs, straining muscles he has never used, pushing through pain that his small raccoon frame was never built to endure. And for a while, it works. Rigby develops visible back muscles. He walks differently. He carries himself with a confidence that has a physical foundation for the first time in the series. But the foundation is rotten. He is building strength on a lie, on a method that is destroying his body even as it makes him feel powerful. And when the injury comes, as it inevitably does, Rigby is left worse off than where he started. His back gives out. The job is lost, the muscles fade, and he is once again exactly who he was before, except now he is also hurt. The metaphor extends beyond the physical. So much of what people do to prove their worth is built on unsustainable methods. You take on too much work because you want to seem indispensable. You say yes to every request because you want to seem reliable. You push through exhaustion because you want to seem tough. And the results look impressive for a while. People notice. People admire the effort. But the method is wrong. The foundation is wrong. And when it collapses, and it always collapses, the damage is worse than if you had never started. Regular Show understands that the desire to prove yourself is not the problem. The problem is proving yourself through methods that harm you, through shortcuts that feel like progress but are actually just a different kind of avoidance. Real strength, the show argues, is not about lifting with your back. It is about having the patience to learn to lift correctly, even if it takes longer, even if it is less impressive, even if nobody notices. The full weight of Rigby's educational failure does not land until Regular Show, the movie, which aired on Cartoon Network on November 25, 2015. The film takes the characters back in time to the day before their high school graduation, and it reveals something the series had only hinted at before. Rigby did not just drop out. He sabotaged Mordecai. The two of them were supposed to play in a volleyball championship, and the outcome of that game would determine whether they received a scholarship to college. Their opponent was their coach, a man named Mr. Ross, and the stakes were everything. Rigby, knowing he was going to fail regardless, rigged the game so that Mordecai would fail alongside him. He could not bear the thought of being left behind. He could not handle the idea that his best friend would go on to something better while he stayed exactly where he was, and so he made sure that neither of them went anywhere. That revelation reframes the entire series. Every episode where Mordecai seems stuck, where he talks about his dead-end job with a weariness that feels too heavy for a cartoon, where he stares at a canvas he cannot bring himself to paint. Every one of those moments is partially Rigby's fault. Not because Rigby is evil, but because Rigby was afraid. And fear, Regular Show argues quietly but persistently, is the most common reason people do harm. Not cruelty, not ambition, not malice. Just the quiet, desperate fear that the people you love will outgrow you if you let them. Think about what that means for a moment. Think about what it means to discover that the trajectory of your entire life was altered by the person sitting next to you. That the dead-end job, the unfinished art, the years of drifting, all of it traces back to a single act of sabotage committed by someone you trusted completely. Most friendships would not survive that revelation. Most people would walk away. Most people would be justified in walking away. And the show knows this. It does not pretend the betrayal is minor. It does not minimize the cost. It sits with the full weight of what Rigby did and forces both the characters and the audience to reckon with it. The movie does not end with the friendship destroyed. It ends with forgiveness. Not easy forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness that comes from a quick apology and a handshake. The kind that comes from Mordecai looking at Rigby and seeing, clearly, the full scope of what he did, understanding how many years it cost him, understanding how different his life might have been, and then choosing to stay, choosing to be his friend anyway. Not because the betrayal does not matter, but because the friendship matters more. That is a life-changing lesson. Forgiveness is not about pretending the wound did not happen. It is about deciding that the person who caused it is worth more to you than the pain they inflicted. That is an incredibly difficult thing to do. It requires you to hold two truths at the same time. This person hurt me, this person is my friend, both are real, both are valid, and the choice to prioritize one over the other is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of love, real love, the kind that costs something, the kind that leaves a mark, the kind you have to choose again every day because the wound does not stop aching just because you decided to forgive the person who caused it. The redemption that follows takes years. It takes the entire back half of the series. In Season 7, which premiered on June 26, 2015, Rigby enrolls in high school again. Not a GED program. Not an online equivalency course. Actual high school with teenagers as a grown man in his mid-20s. The show does not spare him the humiliation. He sits in classrooms with people half his age. He struggles with material that comes easily to everyone around him. He fails tests. He gets confused by assignments that his younger classmates breeze through. He has to study. He has to ask for help. He has to sit with the discomfort of being the oldest person in the room and the furthest behind. And he does it, episode by episode, quietly, without fanfare, without a montage set to inspirational music. Rigby does the work. He shows up, he reads the textbook, he takes the tests, he endures the embarrassment. He sits in hallways between classes, surrounded by teenagers who do not understand why a grown man is here, and he eats his lunch, and he does not leave. He does not quit when the first test comes back with a failing grade. He does not quit when the second one does either. He asks his teachers for help, which requires him to admit that he needs it, which requires him to abandon the last remaining shred of the facade he has been hiding behind for his entire adult life. The facade that says, I do not care. The facade that says, this does not matter to me. The facade that says, I chose not to finish, as if choosing failure is somehow more dignified than attempting success and falling short. Rigby dismantles that facade brick by brick, and behind it, there is just a person. A person who wants to learn. A person who wants to be better. A person who has been afraid for so long that fear became indistinguishable from identity, and who is now, for the first time, choosing to be something other than his own worst story about himself, because he has finally found something more powerful than his fear of failure. He has found a reason to try. The reason is Eileen Roberts. Eileen, a mole voiced by Minty Lewis who works at the coffee shop alongside Margaret, develops a crush on Rigby early in the series, first clearly demonstrated in the Season 2 episode Do Me a Solid. Rigby does not return her feelings for a long time. He barely acknowledges her existence. In the early seasons, he treats her as an inconvenience, someone Margaret's friend drags along on outings. He does not see her. And the show, to its enormous credit, does not frame this as romantic tension. It frames it as Rigby's blindness, as his inability to recognize something valuable because he is too busy wanting something else. But the show is patient with this. It lets the relationship develop over seasons through small moments that accumulate into something substantial. In the Season 5 episode Camping Can Be Cool, Eileen impresses Rigby by starting a fire without matches. He says that is cool. He does not look at her differently in that moment. He does not fall in love. But a door opens just slightly and the show trusts the audience to notice. In the Season 6 episode Merry Christmas Mordecai, Rigby gives Eileen a mistletoe disco ball and kisses her on the cheek. It is not a grand gesture, it is an awkward one. And it means everything. By the time of the Season 6 finale Dumped at the Altar, which aired on June 25, 2015, Rigby casually reveals that he and Eileen have been dating for months. The audience did not see the beginning. The show chose not to show it, because some beginnings are too quiet for cameras. Some beginnings happen in the space between episodes, in the conversations that happen off screen, in the moments where two people look at each other and decide, without saying it, that this is something. But it is what Eileen represents to Rigby that matters more than the romance itself. Eileen is competent, she is smart, she is organized and ambitious, and kind, and she has a future that extends beyond the park. She has plans, she has goals. And Rigby, for the first time in his life, meets someone whose respect he wants to earn, not through shortcuts or tricks or stolen keyboards or brain max or any of the other desperate gambits he has used to close the gap between who he is and who he wants to be, but through genuine, sustained, painful effort. The Season 7 episode, The Eileen Plan, makes this explicit. Rigby returns to high school specifically because he wants to be worthy of the life Eileen is building. She finds out, and she tells him she likes him for who he is. But she does not tell him to stop, because the show understands something essential about love that most romantic stories get wrong. The right person does not love you out of your growth. The right person makes you want to grow, not because they demand it, not because they set conditions, but because their existence in your life raises the stakes of your own existence in a way that makes settling for less feel like a betrayal of something sacred. Rigby's graduation, in the Season 7 finale Rigby's Graduation Day special, which aired on June 30th, 2016, is one of the most emotionally earned moments in the entire series. Principal Dean has selected Rigby to appear on a television program called Inspire America because while many people drop out of high school, few come back, and Rigby came back. He has to give a speech. He wears a banana costume because he is still Rigby. He crashes a motor scooter into several other graduates on his way to the podium. He has a couple of false starts, stumbling over his words in front of cameras and an audience and the people who told him he would never amount to anything. But he gives the speech, and it is rousing, and Principal Dean hands him his diploma, and it is real. After 7 seasons of avoiding responsibility, of taking shortcuts, of sabotaging himself and the people he loves, of drinking chemicals and hiring doppelgangers and rigging volleyball games, Rigby stands on a stage and holds a piece of paper that says he finished something. The show does not treat this as a grand triumph. It does not play swelling music and freeze frame on his face. It treats it as what it is, a beginning. Because graduating high school at 25 is not a victory lap. It is a first step taken embarrassingly late, and the show respects Rigby enough to acknowledge that, without diminishing it. Both things are true. You should have done this years ago, and you are doing it now, and that matters. That honesty, that willingness to let growth be slow and incomplete and unglamorous, is one of the most important things regular show teaches. You do not transform overnight. You do not wake up one morning as the person you want to be. You become that person through thousands of small, boring, difficult choices that nobody applauds. You become that person by showing up to the class you do not want to attend and reading the textbook you do not want to read and studying for the test you are probably going to fail, and then you take the test. And maybe you do fail, and then you study again, and again, until one day you pass, and nobody throws you a parade, and the world does not stop spinning to acknowledge your accomplishment, and you go home, and you eat dinner, and you go to sleep, and you are different. Not because something magical happened, but because you did the thing you were afraid of, and you survived it. That is the lesson. Not that you will succeed, but that you have to try, and trying is enough. Trying is the whole thing. It is worth pausing here to consider what Rigby's arc means in the broader context of how stories usually treat characters like him. In most narratives, the irresponsible character either learns his lesson quickly through a single transformative event, or remains static, serving as comic relief, whose flaws are the joke rather than the subject. Regular show refuses both options. It lets Rigby be terrible for years. It lets him fail repeatedly, sometimes in the same way, sometimes in new ways that are variations on the same theme. It lets the audience grow frustrated with him, lets the other characters grow frustrated with him, lets the frustration build to the point where you wonder if he will ever change, and then it rewards the patience, not with a sudden transformation, but with a gradual one, so gradual that you almost do not notice it happening until you look back and realize that the Rigby who stands on the graduation stage is fundamentally different from the Rigby who drank a bottle of Brain Max 5 seasons earlier. The show trusts its audience to wait. It trusts the process, and in doing so, it teaches something about growth that almost no other animated series has had the patience to teach. Real change is not a montage. Real change is invisible while it is happening. You do not feel yourself becoming different. You just wake up one day and realize that the things that used to scare you do not scare you anymore, and you cannot point to the exact moment when the fear left because it did not leave in a moment. It left in 1,000 moments, each one too small to notice, each one too quiet to name. The parallel arc to Rigby's belongs to Mordecai, and it is in some ways even more painful to watch, because Mordecai is the one who should have made it. He is the one with talent. He is the one who went to art school, who has a creative vision, who carries himself with the quiet confidence of someone who believes he is destined for more than raking leaves. He draws, he paints, he has an artistic eye that the show demonstrates repeatedly in episodes where his visual imagination solves problems the other characters cannot approach. And yet, for the majority of the series, Mordecai does absolutely nothing with any of it. He works at the park, he plays video games, he pines after women he cannot commit to, and he waits. He waits for his life to start, as if starting it is something that happens to you rather than something you do. There is a particular kind of paralysis that afflicts talented people, and Mordecai has it in its most acute form. It is the paralysis of potential. When you know you could do something great, the possibility of doing it becomes a comfort in itself. You do not need to actually paint the painting because you know you could paint it, and that knowledge feels almost as good as the painting itself. Except it is not. And eventually the gap between what you could do and what you have done becomes so wide that the potential itself starts to feel like an accusation. You carry it around like a debt you never repay, and every day you do not act, the interest compounds. Mordecai's romantic arc is the show's most sustained exploration of this paralysis. But before examining the romance itself, it is worth noting how early the show establishes Mordecai's pattern of performing rather than being. In the season 1 finale, Mordecai and the Rigbys, the 12th episode which aired on November 22, 2010, Mordecai lies to Margaret about having a band. It is a small lie, the kind that seems harmless when it leaves your mouth. He tells her that he and Rigby are musicians. He gives the band her name. He does it because he wants to impress her, because he believes the real version of himself, a groundskeeper who plays video games, is not impressive enough to hold her attention. And when the coffee shop announces an open mic night, the lie becomes a trap. Mordecai and Rigby do not know how to play instruments. They do not have songs. They have nothing but a fabrication and a deadline. They resort to lip-syncing, performing to a pre-recorded track, faking the thing they claimed to be. And of course it falls apart. The deception is exposed in front of the audience, in front of Margaret, in front of everyone. The humiliation is complete. But the lesson is not about the humiliation. The lesson is about why the lie existed in the first place. Mordecai did not believe that who he actually was could be enough for the person he wanted to impress. And that belief, that quiet conviction that the authentic self is insufficient, is the seed from which every failure in his romantic life grows. He spends years performing versions of himself for different people, and every performance eventually collapses, because performances always do. You cannot sustain a fiction indefinitely. The mask slips, the track skips, and the person behind the lip sync has to face the audience with nothing but who they actually are. The romance with Margaret begins in earnest from the first season. Margaret Smith, the Robin voiced by Janie Haddad Tompkins, is present from the very beginning of the series. Mordecai is attracted to her immediately, but he cannot tell her. He freezes. He stammers. He finds excuses. In the season 2 episode, It Is Time, Mordecai becomes so jealous when Rigby gets a date with Margaret that he destroys every clock in the house using a microwave, accidentally transporting himself to Father Time's dimension. He literally breaks time because he cannot handle his own feelings. That is not a metaphor the show is smuggling in. That is the text. Mordecai's inability to process his emotions creates ruptures in the fabric of reality. And still, even after being returned to the beginning of the episode by Father Time's time pony, Mordecai does not tell Margaret how he feels. When Mordecai and Margaret do finally share a kiss, in the season 3 finale, Bad Kiss, which aired on September 3rd, 2012, even that moment cannot escape the gravity of his self-sabotage. The kiss happens. It is real. Margaret leans in. Mordecai leans in. And it is ruined not by a villain or a supernatural interruption, but by Mordecai's own bad breath. The moment he has been building toward for 2 full seasons is spoiled by something mundane, something preventable, something that happened because he was not paying attention to the small details while he was obsessing over the grand gesture. And instead of accepting the imperfect kiss, instead of laughing about it and trying again, Mordecai wants to go back in time to redo it. He wants the moment to be perfect. He cannot accept that life does not offer perfect moments. It offers real ones. And real moments are messy and awkward, and sometimes your breath is bad, and sometimes the kiss is clumsy, and sometimes the most romantic thing you can do is show up imperfectly and let the other person love you anyway. But Mordecai cannot do that. He needs control, he needs the script to play out the way he wrote it in his head, and that need for control is just another form of the paralysis that defines him. He sabotages his own chances through inaction again and again, across dozens of episodes spanning the first 4 seasons. Every viewer can see that Margaret likes him back. Every character on the show can see it. Eileen sees it, Rigby sees it. Even Benson, who has no investment in Mordecai's love life, seems aware of the obvious chemistry. But Mordecai cannot bring himself to close the gap between wanting something and asking for it. That gap is the show's most persistent image. 2 people standing 3 feet apart, one of them burning with the desire to speak, the other waiting to hear it, and the silence between them lasting for seasons. When Mordecai finally does act, in the season 4 finale Stake Me Amadeus, which aired on August 12, 2013, the timing is wrong. He plans a special dinner at a restaurant. He rehearses what he is going to say. He gets caught in a counterfeit money scam that nearly destroys the restaurant around him. But he fights through the chaos, and in the aftermath, standing in the ruins of what was supposed to be a perfect evening, he asks Margaret to be his girlfriend. And she says no. Not because she does not care about him, she tells him that what they have is special, that their relationship was the first that could have led somewhere, but she has been accepted to her dream college, Milton University. She is leaving, she chooses her future over his confession, and she runs out of the restaurant in tears, and Mordecai stands there alone, and the episode ends. That moment is devastating not because it is melodramatic, but because it is ordinary. It happens to people every day. You wait too long, you build something up in your mind for months or years, you rehearse the words, you plan the setting, you imagine the response, and by the time you finally act, the window has closed. Not because of fate, not because of villainy, not because the universe conspired against you, because time moved forward while you stood still. Mordecai stood still for 4 seasons. Margaret grew. Margaret applied to colleges and got accepted and made plans and prepared for a life that was bigger than the coffee shop, bigger than the park, bigger than the Blue Jay who could never quite say what he meant. And the show does not let Mordecai off the hook for it. The aftermath unfolds across season 5. In the premiere, Laundry Woes, which aired on September 2nd, 2013, Mordecai finds Margaret's sweater in his laundry and embarks on a road trip to return it to her college. He grows a beard of sorrow, he hallucinates Margaret in the car, he drives across state lines for a sweater that any reasonable person would have mailed. Rigby, who spends the episode being seemingly cruel, refusing to indulge Mordecai's obsession, is actually trying to protect Mordecai from himself. He does not want to see his best friend spiral back into the gravitational pull of a relationship that has already ended. He tells Mordecai the truth. You need to move on. And Mordecai does not want to hear it, because moving on means accepting that the 4 seasons he spent wanting Margaret were not a prologue to a love story. They were the whole story. And the story did not end the way he wrote it in his head. The episode is about the difference between letting go and giving up. Rigby understands, perhaps because of his own failures, perhaps because watching your best friend break down gives you a clarity that your own breakdowns never do, that Mordecai needs to release his grip on what could have been and start building something from what is. Letting go is not surrender. It is not admitting defeat. It is acknowledging that you cannot steer a car while staring in the rearview mirror. The road ahead exists whether you look at it or not, and the longer you refuse to look, the more likely you are to crash. Mordecai does not learn that lesson quickly. He meets Cloudy J, called CJ, a cloud woman voiced by Linda Cardellini, who first appeared in the season 3 episode Yes Dude Yes. CJ is vibrant, fun, emotionally present. She laughs easily. She says what she means. She does not make Mordecai guess. She and Mordecai begin dating in season 5, and for a while it seems like Mordecai has moved forward, but he has not. When Margaret returns from college in season 6, now working as a television reporter, Morga cannot handle the proximity. He avoids Margaret at social gatherings. He lies to CJ about his feelings. He tries to be 2 people at once, the boyfriend who is over his ex and the friend who's clearly not over her, and both versions of him are dishonest. In the season 6 episode 1000th Chopper Flight Party, Mordecai attends a celebration for Margaret's father's 1000th helicopter flight. He spends the entire event trying to avoid Margaret to the point where he lets Rigby cause havoc at the party as a diversion. Margaret eventually confronts him, scolds him for his behavior, and tells him she just wants to be friends. Mordecai relaxes, they have a fun conversation, and CJ, watching from across the room, misinterprets the interaction as a rekindling of their romance. CJ, who has the ability to generate storms when emotionally distressed, nearly destroys the party. Margaret calms the situation by revealing that she is now dating someone else, a news anchor named Del Hanlon. But the damage is done. The trust is cracked. In the season 6 episode Not Great Double Date, which aired on June 22, 2015, the whole situation collapses completely. Mordecai and CJ go on a double date with Margaret and Del Hanlon. CJ asks Margaret directly whether she still has feelings for Mordecai. Margaret says yes. CJ storms out, and Mordecai, who started this cycle by being unable to act, now finds himself paralyzed by having too many options and not enough self-knowledge to choose between them. He is not being pulled in two directions by two women. He is being pulled in no direction by his own inability to know what he wants. The breaking point comes in Dumped at the Altar, the season 6 finale. Muscle Man, the park's green-skinned groundskeeper, whose real name is Mitch Sorenstein, is getting married to his longtime girlfriend Starla. It is supposed to be the happiest day of someone else's life. The ceremony is set, the guests are gathered, and Mordecai uses it to deliver a public rambling speech about his own relationship problems. He hijacks a wedding to process his feelings. He stands in front of people who came to celebrate love and talks about his confusion, his indecision, his inability to choose, as if the venue and the audience and the significance of the occasion are all secondary to his need to be heard. CJ leaves him for good. And the camera does not judge Mordecai in that moment, but it does not excuse him either. It simply shows what happens when you spend years refusing to figure out who you are. You become someone who makes other people's milestones about your own confusion. You become someone who cannot celebrate love because you are too consumed by your own inability to practice it. Here is what regular show understands about heartbreak that most stories do not. Sometimes you are not the victim of your love story. Sometimes you are the obstacle. Sometimes the reason things do not work out is not bad luck or bad timing, but the fact that you are not ready. And being not ready is not a tragedy. It is a condition, and conditions can be treated, but only if you acknowledge them. Mordecai spends 6 seasons being not ready. Not ready to commit to Margaret, not ready to commit to CJ, not ready to commit to his art, not ready to leave the park, not ready to start the life that has been waiting for him since the day he dropped out of art school and picked up a rake. And the show refuses to romanticize that. It does not frame his indecision as poetic or his suffering as noble. It frames it as a waste of Margaret's time, a waste of CJ's heart, a waste of his own years. The resolution comes in the finale, and it is not the resolution anyone expected. Mordecai does not end up with Margaret. He does not end up with CJ. The show's creators have said that the Margaret and CJ story was complete, and both were on their own path. After the park returns to Earth following the events of Season 8, Mordecai finally leaves the park and pursues a career as a visual artist. He opens a studio, he paints, he shows his work at galleries. And at one of those galleries several years after everything, he meets a Batwoman named Steph. They bond over their respective artwork, they get married, they have 3 children, Blue Jay and Bat hybrids. Mordecai finds love with someone the audience has never met, in a life the audience never saw him build, in a future that has nothing to do with the park or the coffee shop or the years he spent standing in front of Margaret, unable to speak. That choice by the writers is quietly radical. It says something that most romance-driven stories refuse to say. The person you spend years obsessing over may not be the person you end up with. The love story you thought was your main plot may turn out to be a chapter, or even a footnote. And the real story, the one that actually leads somewhere, may not begin until you stop trying to force the old one to work. You have to let go, not because the past was not meaningful, but because holding on to it prevents you from reaching forward. That is a life-changing lesson. It is also a deeply uncomfortable one because it means that some of the time you invested in wanting something was not building toward a payoff. It was just time. Spent. Gone. And you have to be okay with that. You have to find a way to honor the wanting without being imprisoned by it. The show reinforces this through the Season 2 episode Over the Top, which aired on May 23, 2011, though in a very different register. In that episode, Rigby challenges Skips, the park's immortal Yeti handyman, to an arm wrestling match. Rigby cheats using a device called a Playco Arm Boy. Skips, enraged, slams Rigby through a table, and Rigby dies. Actually dies, his soul leaves his body. The park crew stands in shock. And Skips, the one who has been alive for centuries, the one who has faced death more times than he can count, has to arm wrestle death himself to win Rigby's soul back. The episode is played partly for comedy, partly for stakes, but the lesson underneath is real. Your actions have consequences that extend beyond yourself. Rigby's cheating did not just risk his own loss. It triggered a chain of events that put his soul in jeopardy and forced Skips to gamble his own against death. When you are reckless, when you cut corners, when you cheat, you do not just endanger yourself. You endanger everyone who is connected to you. Rigby's bet with death, made without telling anyone, is a perfect encapsulation of this. He acted alone, but the consequences were communal, because that is how life works. You are not isolated. Your choices ripple outward, touching people you did not consider, affecting lives you did not factor into your calculus. And the weight of that responsibility is not a burden the show imposes on its characters for dramatic purposes. It is a fact that the show insists they face episode after episode until they understand it. The Season 2 episode Gravesites, which aired on May 9, 2011, offers an unexpected window into Mordecai's capabilities when he is actually motivated. When zombies rise from the park cemetery during a movie night that he and Rigby organized, Mordecai does not freeze. He does not run. He organizes the park crew, coordinates the defense, and fights alongside his friends with a decisiveness that is almost unrecognizable compared to the person who cannot make a phone call to the girl he likes. The episode demonstrates something the show has been hinting at throughout its run. Mordecai is not incapable. He is selectively capable. When the threat is external, when the problem is a monster or a demon or a reanimated corpse, Mordecai acts with courage and clarity. It is only when the threat is internal, when the danger is vulnerability or rejection or the possibility of being seen as he truly is, that the paralysis takes hold. He can face death. He cannot face his own feelings. He can save the park from supernatural annihilation. He cannot save himself from the quiet erosion of waiting too long to act. That dissonance is the cruelest thing about Mordecai's arc, and the show never resolves it neatly. It simply presents it honestly as a portrait of a kind of suffering that is both entirely self-inflicted and entirely understandable. While Mordecai and Rigby occupy the center of the show's emotional gravity, regular show populates its world with characters who each carry their own lesson, often delivered through backstory that arrives late and hits hard. Benson Dunwoody, the park manager, spends the first 2 seasons as a seemingly one-note authority figure. He yells, he threatens to fire Mordecai and Rigby. He turns red, literally, as a gumball machine whose plastic dome flushes with rage. His catchphrase is essentially a screamed threat of termination. For many viewers, Benson is the antagonist. He is the obstacle between the protagonists and their desire to do nothing. He is the reason they have to set up the chairs. But the Season 3 episode Think Positive, which aired on January 30th, 2012, peels that back entirely. Pops, the lollipop-shaped owner's son, tells Benson he is no longer allowed to yell at Mordecai and Rigby. He must be positive. He must express himself through encouragement rather than anger. Benson tries. He holds in his anger. He swallows his frustration every time Mordecai and Rigby slack off, or make a mess, or nearly destroy the park. And the suppressed rage builds and builds and builds until it begins to manifest physically. Benson begins to glow. His body temperature rises. He becomes, quite literally, a miniature star of compressed fury, threatening to destroy the entire park and everyone in it. The episode could have stopped there as a gag about the absurdity of forced workplace positivity. But it goes further. It reveals that Benson's anger has roots that stretch back to his childhood. His father was verbally abusive. Family dinners were shouting matches. When young Benson tried to speak, he could not be heard above the noise. His voice was drowned out by louder voices, angrier voices, voices that had been trained by their own fathers and their own dinner tables and their own histories of not being heard. And Benson's father told him something that became the operating principle of his life. You will not get anything unless you yell for it. That is the lesson his father taught him. The only way to be heard is to scream. The only way to matter is to be louder than everyone else. But that was not all. Benson's father also dismissed his dream of becoming a drummer. He told Benson he had no talent. He told him to get a real job. He became a park manager. And he yelled. Not because he wanted to. Not because he was a bad person. Because it was the only language he had been taught. The yelling was not aggression. It was communication. The only kind of communication his family modeled for him. And every time he screamed at Mordecai and Rigby, he was not just expressing frustration with their work ethic. He was channeling decades of unprocessed pain through the only outlet he knew. That backstory does not excuse Benson's behavior. The show never claims it does, but it explains it, and in doing so, it teaches something important about the people in your life who seem unreasonable. Everyone is carrying a history you cannot see. The boss who loses his temper every Tuesday. The parent who cannot express affection without criticism. The friend who flinches when you raise your voice. The teacher who seems unfairly harsh. The stranger who snaps at you in line at the grocery store. They are not performing their dysfunction. They are repeating it. They are playing a recording that was made long before you entered the room, and they cannot hear how loud it is, because it has been playing their entire lives. The only way to break the repetition is to recognize it, which requires the kind of self-awareness that does not come naturally to anyone. It requires someone, at some point, to say this pattern started before me, and it does not have to continue through me. Benson, across the series, slowly mellows. He goes to therapy, he learns to express frustration without explosion, he develops relationships with his employees that are built on something other than intimidation. He does not become a different person. He does not lose his edge or his standards or his expectation that people should do their jobs, but he becomes a better version of the person he already was. And that distinction matters. You do not have to reinvent yourself to grow. You do not have to become someone unrecognizable. You just have to understand yourself well enough to stop hurting the people around you. But the show does not stop at Benson's anger. It also excavates his dreams. The season 4 episode 150-piece Kit, which aired on October 29, 2012, reveals that Benson was not always a park manager. He was a drummer. And not just any drummer. He was the drummer for a hit rock band called Heir to the Throne. He performed what was known as the legendary drum solo on the band's debut album, a performance so technically brilliant that it became the defining moment of the record. He played a 150-piece drum kit. His hands moved with a speed and precision that the rest of the band could not replicate or even fully comprehend. For 6 months, Benson was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was born to do, living inside the dream his father told him he had no talent for. And then the band replaced him. They kicked him out after 6 months and brought in a machine called the Drumatron VX, a robotic drummer that could replicate his technique without requiring a salary, without having feelings, without needing to be credited. The band left Benson completely uncredited on the album. His name did not appear in the liner notes. His solo, the one that defined the record, the one that audiences came to hear, was attributed to a machine that did not exist when he recorded it. They erased him. They took the best thing he ever did and pretended he never did it. The episode follows Benson as he tries to reassemble the 150-piece kit and perform the solo again to prove he was the one who played it. The task is enormous. The kit is scattered, the pieces are in storage and in pawn shops and in the hands of people who do not care about their history. But Benson assembles it piece by piece with the help of Mordecai and Rigby, who for once are invested not because they were told to be, but because they can see what this means to their boss. They can see the person underneath the anger, the person who had a dream and lost it and has been managing a park ever since because the world told him his dream was not worth protecting. When Benson sits behind the completed kit and plays the solo, it is flawless. The sound fills the space like a heartbeat amplified to the scale of a thunderstorm. His ex-bandmates who are watching offer him his spot back. They want him to rejoin the band. And Benson says no, he turns them down, he chooses the park, not because the park is his dream, but because the park is his reality and his reality contains people who showed up for him when his dream did not. That choice is the real solo. The drumming was the proof that he could have been something else. The refusal was the proof that he has become something more. He chose the people who saw him over the people who erased him. He chose the family that formed around a workplace over the career that treated him as disposable. This feeds into an earlier moment that is easy to overlook, but deserves attention. In the season 2 episode This Is My Jam, which aired on March 28, 2011, a terrible pop song called Summertime Loving in the Summertime gets stuck in Rigby's head. The earworm becomes sentient, manifesting as a physical tape creature that terrorizes the park. The situation escalates until Benson steps in, not with anger, not with a lecture, but with his drums. He sits behind a kit and plays a counterbeat, providing the rhythmic foundation for a new song that the group writes together to overpower the earworm. His drumming saves the park, not his management, not his yelling. His talent, the thing his father told him was worthless. The thing the world told him did not matter. In the moment of crisis, it was the dream, not the day job, that made the difference. And the show trusts the audience to notice that irony without underlining it. The gift you were told to abandon is sometimes the one that saves you. The season 3 episode Dead at 8, which aired on May 28, 2012, introduces a lesson about responsibility that operates on an entirely different frequency than the usual task avoidance formula. In this episode, Death agrees to spare Muscleman's life on one condition. Mordecai and Rigby must babysit his son Thomas for the evening. Death's child is, as one might expect, difficult. He is supernatural. He is powerful. He throws tantrums that shake the walls and rearrange the furniture and summon minor hellscapes in the living room. And Mordecai and Rigby, who cannot be trusted to set up folding chairs, are now responsible for keeping a child alive, a child whose father is the literal personification of mortality. The episode is funny, and the physical comedy of two slackers trying to wrangle an all-powerful toddler delivers exactly what you would expect. But underneath the comedy sits something unexpectedly tender. Mordecai and Rigby have to figure out how to care for someone else. Not for their own benefit, not to avoid punishment, not to impress anyone. They have to do it because another person's life depends on it, because Muscle Man's survival is tied to their competence, because the stakes have risen beyond consequence and into genuine moral weight. And they rise to meet it. Imperfectly, chaotically, with every mistake you would expect from two people who have never been responsible for anything fragile. But they do it. They get the child to sleep. They keep him safe. They return him to his father intact. And Death, the entity who has faced them as an adversary in previous episodes, looks at them with something resembling respect. Because even Death can recognize when someone has grown, even slightly, even temporarily, into a version of themselves that is capable of care. The Season 3 episode Busted Cart, which aired on May 14, 2012, offers another window into Benson's depth. Mordecai and Rigby damage the park's golf cart, and Benson has to drive it to a dealership before the warranty expires. The two of them sneak along for the ride. The episode becomes a road trip, with Benson growing increasingly frustrated by their presence, and the three of them facing a series of escalating obstacles. But at the crisis point, Benson breaks down. He explains, through tears, that he is terrified of losing his job. He says that if the cart is not returned in time, he will have nothing. That word, nothing, hangs in the air. Benson is not afraid of failure. He is afraid of worthlessness. He is afraid that without this job, without this park, without the identity of being the manager, he has no identity at all. And Mordecai and Rigby, seeing their boss cry, seeing the man who screams at them every day reduced to someone terrified and vulnerable, do the right thing. They take a dangerous shortcut through Highway 13. They risk their lives to get the cart to the dealership. They make it with a second to spare. They are injured. An ambulance has to come. But they made it. And they made it for Benson. Not because they were afraid of being fired, but because they saw someone who needed help, and they helped. That is what the show does at its best. It takes characters who annoy each other, who frustrate each other, who scream at each other across parking lots and parks and living rooms, and it reveals the care underneath. The care that is too awkward to say out loud. The care that only becomes visible in a crisis. The care that is, despite everything, the reason they all keep showing up to the same park day after day, year after year. Then there is Skips, the immortal Yeti who serves as the park's handyman. Skips is the oldest character in the show, both literally and figuratively. He has been alive for centuries. He can fix anything mechanical. He has faced supernatural threats before. He is the one everyone goes to when the situation becomes genuinely dangerous. The one who opens an ancient book and says, "I have seen this before." For the first 4 seasons, Skips is largely defined by his competence. He is the reliable one, the wise one, the one who skips everywhere he goes, never walking, always bouncing forward with that distinctive gait that becomes as familiar as a heartbeat. The reason for the skipping is the reason for everything else about Skips, and it is revealed in the Season 5 special Skip story, which aired on April 14th, 2014, as a double-length episode. In a flashback that spans decades, we learn that Skips was once a young man named Walks. He was a fighter. He had been expelled from multiple schools for brawling. He was angry and lost, and defined by his fists, until he enrolled in a school run by a headmaster named Bennett, where he met a woman named Mona. Mona was playful. She was kind. She saw past the fighter to the person underneath. And one day she skipped alongside him around the school grounds 3 times, and she laughed and she suggested calling him Skips instead of Walks. It was a joke, a small, beautiful, meaningless joke that became the foundation of his identity. They fell in love. It was the kind of love that makes a person want to be different. The kind that makes the fighter want to put down his fists. The kind that makes you believe, despite every piece of evidence your life has provided to the contrary, that maybe the world is worth treating gently. And then Mona died. She died saving him. A massive slab of concrete fell from the ceiling during a battle with Clorgbane, a villain who returns every 157 years. And Mona threw herself in front of it. She gave her life so that Walks could survive to stop the threat. In the aftermath of her death, Walks was offered immortality by a group of guardians. He accepted it not because he wanted to live forever, not because he craved power or feared death, but because he wanted to honor her sacrifice by being there to protect others the way she had protected him. He changed his name from Walks to Skips, because he would never walk again. Every step he takes is a skip. Every movement is a memorial. He has been grieving for centuries, and he processes that grief by helping everyone else, by being the one who fixes things, by being the one who stays calm, by being the one who carries the ancient knowledge and the heavy tools and the weight of knowing that the woman he loved is never coming back. The lesson here is about loss, and it is delivered without sentimentality, without soft lighting or swelling strings. Losing someone you love does not make you stronger. It does not unlock a hidden power. It does not transform you into a better version of yourself through some alchemical process of suffering made noble. It gives you a wound that never fully closes, and the best you can do is let that wound inform the way you live rather than letting it consume the way you live. Skips does not talk about Mona. He does not wear his grief on the surface, he does not bring her up in conversation or keep a shrine in his trailer, but it is there in every skip, in every time he stays up late fixing something that is broken. In every time he puts himself between danger and the people he has chosen to protect. In every time he says, I can handle this with a quiet certainty that comes from having already survived the one thing he could not handle. Grief, regular show suggests, is not something you get over. It is not something you move past. It is something you learn to carry. And if you carry it with purpose, if you let it fuel your kindness instead of your bitterness, it can become the foundation of a life worth living. Even a very, very long one. The season 5 episode Skips vs. Technology adds another dimension to this. Skips, who can fix anything mechanical, is helpless in front of a computer. Mordecai and Rigby jam a printer, crash a computer, and ask Skips to help. He looks at the screen. Error number 219. He has no idea what it means. He leaves the room depressed because they called someone else to fix the computer, and Skips has no idea how computers work. The thing that defines him, his ability to fix things, to be the reliable one, to have the answer, is suddenly irrelevant. The world has changed in a way that his centuries of experience did not prepare him for. This is a quiet episode, and it is easily overlooked in discussions of the show's greatest hits, but it teaches something that becomes more relevant with every passing year. Competence is not permanent. The skills that made you valuable yesterday may not be the skills that make you valuable tomorrow. The world does not wait for you to catch up. It moves forward, with or without your participation, and the gap between what you know and what the world requires grows wider every day you refuse to learn something new. Skips is centuries old. He has faced demons and gods and the personification of death. But a computer monitor defeats him. And the humility to admit that, the willingness to say, I do not know how to do this, instead of pretending you do, instead of leaving the room and hoping the problem fixes itself, is one of the most difficult and necessary qualities a person can develop. Skips eventually learns. He asks Mordecai and Rigby to teach him, swallowing the pride of centuries and sitting beside two people he has mentored through countless crises, now receiving their help with something as basic as navigating a desktop. The role reversal is not played for mockery, it is played for tenderness. Because the willingness to let someone younger and less experienced teach you is an act of humility that gets harder, not easier, as you accumulate authority and knowledge and years. The more you know, the more painful it becomes to say, I do not know this. And Skips, who knows more than anyone alive, says it. He adapts. Because immortality, the show argues, is not about being unchanging. It is about being willing to change endlessly. Even when the changes make you feel small. Even when the learning curve makes you feel old. Even when the world seems to have moved on to a language you do not speak. Pops Maillard is, on the surface, the simplest character in regular show. He is a lollipop-shaped man with a high-pitched voice, a childlike disposition, and an innocence so complete that it borders on obliviousness. He calls things jolly good show, he claps his hands when he is happy. He does not understand sarcasm or cruelty or any of the defensive social mechanisms that the other characters use to navigate their days. He wears a top hat. He lives in a house on the park grounds that belongs to his father, Mr. Maillard, who owns the park itself. In the early seasons, Pops exists primarily as comic relief. He is the naive old man in a world that is far too cynical for him. He is the one who misunderstands jokes and takes metaphors literally, and responds to every situation with a generosity so complete that the other characters do not always know what to do with it. But in Season 8, the final season, which began airing on September 26, 2016, the show reveals that Pops is not simple at all. He is the chosen one. He is the embodiment of pure good, born on a planet called Lollyland, and he has a twin brother named Anti-Pops, who is the embodiment of pure evil. Every cycle of the universe ends with their confrontation. Every time, they fight. Every time, the universe resets. It has been happening forever. An eternal loop of violence and destruction played out by two brothers who were created for no purpose other than to destroy each other. And the only way to break the cycle is for one of them to do something different. Mr. Maillard, Pops' adoptive father, found him as a baby during an asteroid expedition. He raised Pops as his own son, knowing what Pops was, knowing the destiny that awaited him. In the Season 8 episode The Ice Tape, Mayallard tells Pops the truth about his origins. He explains the cycle, the inevitability, the destiny, and then he says something that transcends the mythology entirely. He says that no matter what, he always thought of Pops as his real son. That is not a lore revelation. That is a father telling his child that love is not defined by blood, that identity is not determined by origin, that the family you choose is as real as the family that made you, and sometimes more so. In the 3-part series finale, A Regular Epic Final Battle, which aired on January 16, 2017, Pops does the unthinkable. He does not fight anti-Pops. He has seen what fighting leads to. He has seen the cycle repeat across eons, every version of himself choosing violence, every version failing, every version resetting the universe back to zero. And he decides, standing at the edge of annihilation, that he will not be another version that fights. He wraps his arms around anti-Pops, he hugs him, he offers nothing but love, pure, unconditional, absurd, gentle love, directed at the embodiment of destruction. And it works. The love weakens anti-Pops. It dissolves the hatred. It breaks through the armor of evil because evil, the show argues, has no defense against genuine kindness. You can build walls against anger. You can prepare for violence. You can strategize against aggression, but you cannot prepare for someone who refuses to be your enemy. You cannot fight someone who will not fight back. And in that moment, Pops does the only thing left. He throws himself and his brother into a star. He ends the cycle forever, at the cost of his own life. J.G. Quintel has said that Pops' sacrifice was meant to symbolize the sadness and loss that comes with the sort of maturity the rest of the characters have finally attained. And that is precisely what it does. Pops, the most innocent character, is the one who makes the most mature choice. He chooses not to perpetuate violence. He chooses not to win. He chooses to end the conflict by absorbing it, by refusing to let it define the terms of his existence, by meeting destruction with the one force that destruction cannot comprehend. And that choice costs him everything. The lesson Pops teaches is the hardest one in the entire series. Kindness is not naivety. The people who move through the world with open hearts are not doing so because they do not understand how cruel the world can be. They are doing so because they understand it perfectly, and they have decided that cruelty will not be their response. Pops has seen the cycle of destruction. He has watched it repeat across eons. He knows exactly what anti-Pops is capable of. He has witnessed the end of the universe multiple times from the inside. And he chooses a hug, not because he is too innocent to fight, but because he is wise enough to know that fighting is what keeps the cycle going. You can read this as a metaphor for generational trauma, and I think the show intends you to. The cycle of violence that repeats in families, the patterns of abuse and neglect and anger that pass from parent to child to grandchild, the dinner tables where voices are raised and fists are clenched and children learn that the world is a place where you either scream or get screamed at, these cycles do not break on their own. Someone has to be the one who says it stops here. Someone has to take the hit, absorb the pain, choose a different response, and bear the cost of that choice. It is the hardest thing a person can do. It is harder than fighting. It is harder than winning. Because breaking a cycle means you have to feel everything the cycle was designed to prevent you from feeling. You have to stand in the full force of the anger and the hurt and the fear and let it pass through you without passing it on. Pops does not just break the cosmic cycle. He breaks the emotional one. He demonstrates that the pattern of harm, the inherited violence, the reflexive cruelty that passes from generation to generation, like a virus encoded in behavior rather than blood, can be interrupted, not by superior force, not by strategy, but by the simple, devastating decision to absorb the pain rather than redirect it. To say the hurt stops here, with me in my body, and it does not get to travel any further. That is what makes his sacrifice not just narratively satisfying, but philosophically complete. He does not defeat evil, he dissolves it. He shows that the opposite of destruction is not construction, but compassion. And the cost of that compassion is everything he has. And Regular Show, a show about two slackers who avoid mowing the lawn, dedicates its entire finale to honoring that difficulty. After Pops' death, the park crew returns to Earth. They have been in space for 3 years. They are different people. And the show, in its final minutes, jumps forward in time and shows us where they all end up. Mordecai becomes an artist. Rigby marries Eileen and has 2 daughters whom he introduces to video games as soon as they are able to play, passing on the one thing he always loved without guilt or shame. Muscle Man and Starla have more children. They already had a daughter before the space mission, and they expand their family after returning. High Five Ghost marries Celia, the woman he met in a cafe 4 years before the season 5 episode, The Postcard, The woman who went to Prague to study, the woman who agreed that if they were both still single when she returned, they would pick up where they left off. They both become DJs. Benson continues to run the park, now with new employees, still managing, still organizing, still caring about the place that cared about him. Skips remains at his side, still skipping, still fixing things, still carrying the memory of a woman who died so he could live. The montage lingers on details that a lesser show would skip. Rigby teaching his daughters to play video games, the controller too large for their small hands, his patience visible in the way he adjusts the difficulty without being asked. Mordecai standing in front of a canvas in a sunlit studio, painting with the same hands that once raked leaves, the brush moving with a confidence that took decades to develop. Benson in the park, older now, still managing, still organizing, still the gumball machine who cares too much about a place most people would have left years ago. These are not dramatic moments. They are life. They are what happens after the adventure ends, and the credits should have rolled but did not, because the real story was always what came next. They gather for a 25th anniversary reunion. They stand in front of a statue of Pops erected in the center of the park next to a newer statue of Mr. Maillard, who has since passed away. They bring their families, they take a photograph, and Mordecai and Rigby, now 54 years old, stand beside each other and look at the statue, and they remember Pops' sacrifice. They remember that none of them would have been able to lead such beautiful lives without him. They remember that the kindest person they ever knew gave everything so that they could have ordinary days. I have watched that montage more times than I can count, and it still works. It is one of the most powerful endings in television animation. Not because it is epic, not because it is explosive, but because it is mundane. These characters who spent 8 seasons battling cosmic threats and supernatural disasters, who punched through dimensions and wrestled death and traveled to the edge of the universe in the very first episode, end up living regular lives. Ordinary lives, lives filled with children and art shows and bad jokes and park maintenance, and the quiet satisfaction of having survived everything and come out the other side holding someone's hand. That is the point. That was always the point. The show was called Regular Show because the extraordinary events were never the real story. The real story was always the regular one. The story of people figuring out how to be responsible, how to be honest, how to let go, how to love imperfectly, how to work even when the work feels meaningless, how to grow up without losing the parts of yourself that made you worth knowing in the first place. The supernatural chaos was just the amplifier. The signal was always human. I want to talk about Muscle Man for a moment, because his arc deserves more attention than it typically receives in retrospective discussions of the series. It carries one of the show's most practical and applicable lessons about love. Mitch Sorenstein, better known as Muscle Man, is introduced as a crude, overweight, green-skinned groundskeeper whose primary social contribution is a series of my mom jokes that the other characters find exhausting. He is loud. He is sweaty. He is, by conventional standards, not someone you would describe as aspirational. He is easy to dismiss. He is designed to be easy to dismiss, and that is precisely the point. But before discussing Muscle Man's romantic life, there is an episode that reveals the depth of his emotional landscape in a way that most viewers do not expect. The Season 3 episode Trucker Hall of Fame, which aired on June 18, 2012, begins with the death of Muscle Man's father, known as Muscle Dad. The park crew has to help Muscle Man travel to the Trucker Hall of Fame to spread his father's ashes, which are contained inside a trucker hat. Muscle Man has spent his entire life believing his father was a legendary trucker, a man of the road, a figure of rugged independence and blue-collar mythology. His identity is built in part on the foundation of who he believes his father was. And then the truth emerges. Muscle Dad was not a trucker. He was a forklift driver. The truckers at the Hall of Fame reveal this casually, almost cruelly, and the revelation lands on Muscle Man like a physical blow. His father lied to him. The man he idolized, the man whose image he modeled himself after, the man whose stories he repeated to friends and whose legacy he carried with quiet pride, was performing a version of himself that did not exist. The mythology was a fabrication. The trucker was a forklift driver, and Muscle Man, standing in a room full of actual truckers who knew the truth, has to reckon with the gap between the father he loved and the father who actually existed. But then Muscle Man finds a letter inside his father's portrait, and the letter explains everything. Muscle Dad wrote that the world is a harsh place, and he only pranked his son, only told the exaggerated stories, only built the mythology to toughen him up for when he would no longer be around. The lies were not vanity. They were protection. They were a father's imperfect, misguided, deeply loving attempt to armor his child against a world he knew would be unkind. And Muscle Man reads this letter and forgives his father not because the deception was justified, but because the love behind it was real. That is a lesson about parents that regular show delivers with remarkable grace. Your parents were not perfect. They lied to you about some things. They protected you from truths they thought you were not ready for. They built myths around themselves because they wanted you to feel safe, to feel proud, to feel like you came from something strong. And when you discover the truth, when the myth falls away and the real person stands before you, smaller and more flawed and more human than the story you were told, the choice is not between anger and acceptance. The choice is between holding the lie against them and understanding the love that created it. When Muscle Dad's ghost appears later in the episode to save his son from danger, it is not a deus ex machina. It is a statement. The love outlasts the lie. The protection outlasts the protector. The man who was not a trucker was still in every way that mattered, a father. Underneath the crudeness, Muscle Man has the most stable and healthy romantic relationship in the entire series. His bond with Starla, which stretches back to their high school prom, is tested repeatedly but never broken. Not by distance, not by supernatural threats, not by the kind of existential confusion that torpedoes every relationship Mordecai attempts. When they do separate early in the series, it is because Muscle Man cannot express his emotions. He deflects with humor, he hides behind a persona, he tells jokes instead of telling truths, and it costs him the person he loves most. But Muscle Man does something that Mordecai cannot do for 6 full seasons. He changes, not dramatically, not through an epiphany or a magical transformation. He learns, slowly and awkwardly, to say what he feels. He learns that vulnerability is not the opposite of strength, it is the evidence of it. He proposes to Starla in the season 6 episode The End of Muscle Man, and the proposal itself is characteristically absurd. He pretends he is going to die, staging an elaborate farewell to his bachelor identity, telling all his friends that this is the end of Muscle Man because he plans to become plain Mitch Sorenstein. He is going to give up the persona entirely. He is going to become someone worthy of Starla. And Starla says no. She rejects the proposal, not because she does not love him, because she does not want Mitch Sorenstein. She wants Muscle Man. She fell in love with the crude, sweaty, joke-telling, my mom referencing, utterly himself version of the man standing in front of her. She wants the person he actually is, not the sanitized version he thinks she deserves. The path to their actual wedding is not smooth either, and the obstacles they face together illuminate another dimension of their bond. In the season 6 episode Married and Broke, Muscle Man discovers that his financial investments, the money he had been setting aside for the wedding, are worthless. His stockbroker has been arrested for fraud. Every dollar he saved is gone. The dream wedding he wanted to give Starla, the ceremony he believed she deserved, is suddenly impossible. And rather than spiral into despair, rather than postpone indefinitely, rather than let the absence of money become the absence of commitment, Muscle Man and Starla enter a game show. The show is called Married and Broke, and it pits couples against each other in physical challenges, the winner receiving an all-expenses-paid wedding. It is absurd. It is humiliating. It is exactly the kind of spectacle that most people would avoid because the risk of public failure outweighs the chance of success. But Muscle Man and Starla do it together. They compete side by side, they endure the challenges they almost lose, and they win not through skill or domination, but through persistence and the disqualification of their opponents, who lied about being American. They win by default. And the show does not frame this as a diminished victory, it frames it as the only kind of victory that matters. They showed up. They stayed. They did not let the circumstances dictate whether or not they would build a life together. The wedding would happen not because everything was perfect, but because the commitment was. That moment is small, but it contains a universe. So often, when people decide to change for someone they love, they believe the change has to be total. They have to become a new person. They have to shed everything that came before, every rough edge, every embarrassing habit, every part of themselves they think is too messy or too loud or too much. But Starla does not want less of Muscle Man. She wants more of him. More honesty, more vulnerability, more of the real person behind the jokes. She wants him to be truthful, not transformed. And when Muscle Man accepts that, when he proposes as himself, rather than as an idea of himself, she says yes. The lesson is about authenticity in love, and it is one that the show contrasts directly and deliberately with Mordecai's arc. Mordecai spends years trying to be whoever he thinks his romantic interest wants him to be. He performs maturity for Margaret, he performs spontaneity for CJ. He rehearses conversations and plans dinners and tries to control every variable because he believes that love is something you earn by being the right person, and being the right person means figuring out what the other person wants and becoming it. He is a chameleon. And chameleons, the show observes, end up with no color of their own. Muscle Man, who is objectively less suave, less talented, less conventionally attractive, and less socially skilled than Mordecai, succeeds in love precisely because he does not perform. He is who he is, he tells his terrible jokes, he eats too much, he sweats through his shirt at inappropriate moments, he is loud at times when quiet would be more appropriate, and someone loves him for it. Not despite it. For it. That is what Mordecai takes 6 seasons and 2 failed relationships and a hijacked wedding to understand. You cannot audition your way into love. You cannot rehearse vulnerability. You cannot practice being real. You either are or you are not, and the moment you start performing, the performance becomes the relationship, and the relationship becomes a stage. And the stage becomes a prison. And the prison becomes the place where you spend years wondering why nothing feels authentic when the answer is that you have not been authentic for a single moment since the curtain went up. You cannot be loved for who you are if you never let anyone see who you are. You cannot build a real relationship on a performance. Eventually, the curtain has to come down, and if the person behind the curtain is a stranger, even to yourself, then there is no foundation. There is nothing to build on. There is just a stage and an actor who forgot his lines. Their wedding in Dumped at the Altar is the same episode where Mordecai's romantic arc implodes. That is not a coincidence. The show places these 2 events in the same episode deliberately, so you can see the contrast in the sharpest possible relief. On one side, a man who knows himself marrying a woman who loves what she knows. On the other, a man who does not know himself using someone else's wedding as a confessional. The lesson is clear. Do the work on yourself before you try to build something with someone else. Know who you are before you ask someone to love you. Otherwise, you will build on sand, and when the storm comes, and it always comes, everything collapses. And the collapse will not just hurt you, it will hurt everyone who trusted you enough to attend the ceremony. High Five Ghost, the small silent specter who serves as Muscleman's best friend, carries a quieter lesson, one that is easy to miss because the show gives him less screen time than the other main characters. For much of the series, High Five Ghost, or Fives, is defined primarily through his relationship with Muscleman. He is the sidekick, the supporter, the one who laughs at Muscleman's jokes when nobody else does. He seems content in that role, comfortable in the background, happy to be near someone rather than to be someone. But in the Season 5 episode The Postcard, the show reveals that Fives has a history the audience never suspected. 4 years before the events of the episode, he met a woman named Celia at a cafe. They spent the day together. They discovered they had everything in common. They liked the same music, they shared the same quirks, they did not own phones. They preferred down-tempo electronica. When the hours ran out, Fives said he wanted to see her again, and Celia told him she was leaving for Prague to study. They agreed that if both were still single when she returned, they would pick up where they left off. She sent him a postcard, and he kept it. For 4 years, the lesson is about patience and faith and the quiet courage of waiting for something you believe in. Fives did not chase Celia to Prague. He did not send her 100 messages. He did not grand gesture his way into her life. He waited, he held onto the postcard and the memory and the feeling, and he trusted that if it was real, it would still be real when the time was right. And it was. Celia returns. They reconnect. In the season's 6th episode Merry Christmas, Mordecai, she kisses him under a mistletoe. In the finale, they are married. They become DJs together. In a show full of characters who act impulsively, who escalate minor problems into cosmic disasters, who cannot sit still long enough to let things unfold naturally, Fives is the counterpoint. He is the argument for stillness, for trust, for letting things happen in their own time, rather than trying to force them into yours. Not every relationship needs to be dramatic to be real. Not every love story needs a crisis to prove its worth. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait and trust and keep the postcard in your pocket and believe that the person who matters will come back when they are ready. There is another thread that runs through regular show that I find myself returning to every time I revisit the series, and it has to do with the way the show treats the concept of home. The park is not just a workplace. It is a holding pattern. It is the place where you end up when you do not know where else to go. Every main character in the series is at the park because they are, in some ways, stuck. Mordecai dropped out of art school. Rigby never finished high school. Benson gave up his dream of being a drummer. Skips is bound by an immortal oath. Pops is sheltered by a father who is preparing him for a destiny he does not understand. Muscle Man and High Five Ghost are there because they have nowhere else to be and no particular ambition to be anywhere else. And the show treats this with compassion rather than contempt. It does not mock these characters for being stuck. It does not frame the park as a place of failure or stagnation. Instead, it presents the park as a necessary stage. A chrysalis, a place where transformation happens slowly, invisibly, without anyone noticing until it is complete. Sometimes you need a place to be still while you figure out your next move. Sometimes you need a job that does not demand your full self so that you have the energy to build your full self on the side. Sometimes you need to rake leaves for a few years while you learn how to be a person. The season 7 episode, The Lunch Club, which aired on August 13, 2015, offers a concentrated version of this dynamic. The episode is a direct homage to The Breakfast Club, with the park crew forced into a shared detention after Rigby accidentally ruins Mr. Maillard's brunch. Maillard confines them to write letters of resignation, and over the course of their time together, the characters peel back layers they have never shown each other. Benson reveals the weight of his childhood. Rigby reveals the depth of his shame. Skips reveals the loneliness of his immortality. They share truths they have been carrying alone, and in sharing them, they discover that the park was not just a workplace where they happened to overlap. It was the place that held them together while they were falling apart separately. The episode ends with them walking out together to the strains of a familiar song, Rigby raising his fist in the air in a gesture that is both a tribute and a declaration. They are not just co-workers. They are not just friends. They are the people who saw each other at their lowest and chose to stay. And that is something no resignation letter can dissolve. The Season 2 episode Grave Sites, the 19th episode of that season, which aired on May 9, 2011, offers yet another angle on the park's significance. Mordecai and Rigby organize a movie night in the park's cemetery to raise money, and in doing so, they accidentally wake the dead. The zombies rise, the audience panics, the park becomes a battleground, and the crew has to protect not just themselves, but the people who came to enjoy the space they maintain. The episode is action-driven, fast-paced, built for laughs and thrills, but it carries a quiet implication that lingers after the jokes fade. The park is not just a place where the characters work. It is a place where the community gathers, where families bring children, where people come to sit on benches and watch the fountain and feel for a few hours like the world is manageable, and maintaining that space, even when the maintenance involves battling reanimated corpses, is not meaningless work. It is care. It is service. It is the kind of labor that does not appear on any resume but holds the fabric of a neighborhood together. Mordecai and Rigby do not see it that way. Not yet. Not in Season 2. But the audience does. And the gap between what the characters understand about their work and what the audience understands about their work is one of the show's most elegant ongoing tensions. But the show is also honest about the danger of staying too long. The park is safe, it is predictable, the same people are there every day, the same crises arise and are resolved, the same conversations happen, and predictability, while comforting, is the enemy of growth. Mordecai knows this. He talks about it. He feels it. He describes his job as a dead-end position with a weariness that suggests he has been thinking about it for years, but cannot quite summon the energy to do anything about it. But knowing something and acting on it are two entirely different things, and the gap between those two things is where most of a life can disappear. You can spend decades knowing you should leave, and never actually leaving. You can spend a lifetime standing at the threshold, one hand on the doorknob, never turning it. The park is the kind of place you describe with embarrassment at first and with reverence later. When you are in it, you see the limitations, the repetitive tasks, the difficult boss, the friends who annoy you as often as they comfort you, the feeling that your potential is rotting on the vine because you are spending your best years cleaning a fountain. But when you leave, when you look back from the distance of years and accomplishments and a life that has finally started moving, you see the park differently. You see it as the place where you learn to show up, where you learned that showing up is the hardest and most important thing a person can do, where you learn that the people who irritate you the most are sometimes the people who shape you the most, because they force you to develop patience, and patience is the raw material from which every other virtue is constructed. The entire 8th season, set in space after the events of Rigby's graduation day, launched them off Earth through a literal launch button, functions as a metaphor for this. The park crew is literally displaced from their home. They cannot go back. The button has been pressed. The trajectory has been set. They have to move forward, through space, through the unknown, toward a confrontation they did not choose and cannot avoid. And in that displacement, they find something they could not find at the park. They find purpose. Not the borrowed purpose of daily tasks and paychecks and lawn maintenance, not the small comfortable purpose of doing what you are told and going home at the end of the day, but real purpose. The kind that comes from being tested beyond your comfort zone and discovering that you are capable of more than you thought. The kind that comes from facing an actual enemy and choosing to stand together. The kind that comes from realizing that the holding pattern was not your life, it was the preparation for your life. When they return to Earth after Pops' sacrifice, they do not all go back to the park. Mordecai leaves to become an artist, Rigby leaves to start a family, Muscle Man leaves to raise his children. They outgrow the holding pattern, they graduate from it the way Rigby graduated from high school, late but genuinely. And the show frames that departure not as an abandonment of their home, but as the fulfillment of it. The park was never meant to be forever. It was meant to be long enough to learn what you needed to learn, to fail the ways you needed to fail, to meet the people who would shape you into someone ready for the next thing. And then you leave, and you carry it with you, not as a place, as a phase. One that mattered enormously, one that you honor by living the life it prepared you for, one that you do not return to because returning would mean undoing everything it gave you. This is one of the most mature ideas Regular Show puts forward, and it is one that resonates well beyond the context of animation. Everyone has a park. Everyone has a place they stayed too long because it was comfortable, because the people were familiar, because leaving felt like betrayal, because the unknown was more frightening than the familiar, because starting over seemed impossible, because who you are in that place feels more real than who you might be somewhere else. And the lesson is not that you should have left sooner. The lesson is not that the time you spent there was wasted. The lesson is that you should leave when you are ready. And being ready does not mean being unafraid. It means being afraid and going anyway. It means looking at the park one last time, at the fountain you cleaned, and the chairs you set up, and the lawns you raked, and the people you annoyed, and the people who annoyed you, and the people you love, and saying thank you, and walking through the gate, and not looking back. The Excellent Challenge is a perfect example of the show's ability to embed profound emotional truth inside absurd comedy. In the Season 3 episode Excellent, which aired on February 27, 2012, and which won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Short-Format Animated Program, the setup is pure comedy. A restaurant called Wing Kingdom runs a promotion. Eat a massive omelet of 12 eggs with chili, cheese, 2 biscuits, and a fruit bowl within 1 hour, and you win a trucker hat that says, "I am Excellent." The hat is cheap, the hat is ugly, the hat is objectively worthless. But Rigby wants it with a sincerity that defies rational explanation. He orders the challenge, he starts eating, and he goes into a coma. Because Rigby is allergic to eggs, he ordered a 12-egg challenge while being allergic to eggs. Because the wanting was so powerful that it overrode the knowing. That is the joke. But the episode does not stop there. Mordecai, standing in a hospital room, looking at his best friend in a coma over a hat, decides to complete the challenge himself. Not for the hat, for Rigby. He trains. He prepares, he sits down at the table and eats the massive omelet under the watchful eye of a skeptical waiter. He finishes within the hour, and then he is teleported to a cave where he must choose the correct hat from a vast collection, and choosing wrong means death. A knight informs him that a previous challenger, Jonathan Kimball, chose wrong and died. Mordecai has to remember Rigby's description of the hat, a description so specific, so detailed, so lovingly precise that it could only come from someone who truly cared about this ridiculous thing. Mordecai remembers. He chooses correctly, he brings the hat back to the hospital, he puts it on Rigby's head, Rigby wakes up. The training sequence is one of the show's most loving and detailed set pieces. Mordecai does not just walk into Wing Kingdom and sit down. He prepares, he stretches, he drinks water, he visualizes the omelet, he watches training footage of previous challengers who failed, studying their mistakes, noting where they slowed down, where the eggs defeated them, where the biscuits became obstacles rather than allies. There is a montage, but it is not played for inspiration in the conventional sense. It is played with the seriousness of a boxer preparing for a title fight. Because to Mordecai, that is exactly what it is. He is fighting for his friend. The stakes to him are real. The fact that the prize is a cheap hat and the battlefield is a restaurant table changes nothing about the sincerity of his effort. Benson, who initially dismissed the entire Excellent Challenge as a waste of time, ends up standing outside Wing Kingdom on the day of the attempt, watching through the window, unable to look away, because even he can see that something genuine is happening inside that ridiculous contest. The episode works on every level. As comedy, it is absurd and satisfying. As adventure, it is tense and surprising. As a mystery, the cave challenge is genuinely nerve-wracking. But as a statement about friendship, it is profound. Mordecai risks his life literally for a hat. Not because the hat matters, but because his friend matters. Because Rigby wanted this stupid, pointless, utterly insignificant thing with all his heart, and Mordecai loves Rigby enough to take that want seriously. To treat it not as a joke, but as a mission. To say, your desires are real to me, even the ones that make no sense, even the ones I would never have myself, because you are real to me, and honoring what you care about is how I honor you. That is what it means to truly know someone. It means knowing what they care about, even when what they care about seems ridiculous, and pursuing it on their behalf as if it were your own. There is something else hiding in this episode, though, something about desire and consequence that the show returns to again and again. Rigby wanted the hat. He wanted it so badly that he ignored the fact that he was allergic to the thing he would have to eat to get it. He charged straight into a challenge his body could not handle because the prize blinded him to the cost. And that is a pattern you can trace through the entire series like a thread in a tapestry. Characters wanting things so badly that they ignore the obvious reasons they should not pursue them. Mordecai wanting Margaret so badly that he cannot see she is already planning a future without him. Rigby wanting to be seen as smart so badly that he drinks a brain-altering chemical without reading the directions. Muscle Man wanting to impress people so badly that he creates disaster after disaster. Benson wanting control so badly that his anger consumes him. Desire is not the problem. The show never says do not want things. It never says be content with nothing. It never frames ambition or longing or hope as weaknesses. But it consistently says know what wanting costs and decide whether you can afford it before you order the 12-egg omelet. That is not cynicism. That is wisdom. And it is the kind of wisdom that only comes from having wanted something, paid the price, and survived to want differently the next time. The wanting does not stop. It should not stop. But it can become wiser. It can become more honest. It can learn to check whether you are allergic before you take the first bite. There is a lesson Regular Show teaches about fear that I rarely see discussed but sits at the center of some of its most memorable episodes. The Season 2 premiere, Elo Governor, which aired on November 29, 2010, opens with Mordecai and Rigby watching a low-budget 1982 British horror movie about a possessed taxicab. The movie's tagline, according to Rigby, is "Pay the fare or pay the price." The film is cheap and ridiculous. Mordecai laughs it off, but Rigby cannot. The image of the evil taxi lodges itself in his mind and begins to haunt him. He sees it everywhere. In parking lots, in traffic, in his dreams. A piece of fiction has become a piece of his reality, and he cannot shake it no matter how hard he tries. Mordecai's initial response is pragmatic. He forces Rigby to watch the movie over and over again, pressing his face against the television screen, trying to desensitize him through repeated exposure. It does not work. A full day of forced viewing does nothing to diminish Rigby's terror, and the reason it does not work is the reason most direct confrontations with fear do not work. You cannot reason someone out of a fear they did not reason themselves into. Fear does not live in the logical part of the brain. It lives in the part that operated long before logic arrived, the part that does not care whether the threat is real or fictional, or rational or absurd. It cares only that the threat feels real, and feelings do not respond to argument. What eventually helps Rigby is not exposure therapy or rational persuasion. It is the discovery that the actual taxi following him throughout the episode belongs to a video store employee who just wants the movie returned. The threat that terrified him was mundane. The monster was a late fee, and the relief Rigby feels is not because the fear was stupid. It is because the fear was disproportionate. He was spending enormous energy defending himself against a danger that did not exist, and the energy itself became the problem. The fear was more damaging than the thing he feared. That is a lesson that applies to almost every area of life, and Regular Show presents it with a specificity that elevates it beyond platitude. The show does not say fear is irrational and leave it at that. It shows in granular detail how fear operates, how it starts small, how it embeds itself, how it grows in darkness and silence, feeding on the attention you give it, becoming larger with every glance you steal in its direction. Rigby's fear of the taxi is not irrational to Rigby, it is the most real thing in his world. And the show respects that reality even as it demonstrates its falseness. Because dismissing someone's fear as irrational does not make it go away, it just makes them afraid alone. The only thing that dissolves fear is information. Not courage, exactly, but the willingness to approach the thing you are afraid of closely enough to see it for what it actually is. The amount of suffering you experience from anticipating a problem almost always exceeds the suffering the problem itself would cause. You lie awake at 3 a.m. imagining worst-case scenarios that never materialize. You avoid difficult conversations for months because you have convinced yourself the conversation will be catastrophic, and by the time you finally have it, the avoidance has caused more damage than the conversation ever could. You spend years not applying for the job, or not asking the question, or not making the phone call because the fear of rejection has grown so large in your mind that it has become indistinguishable from rejection itself. And Regular Show, through a story about a raccoon and a haunted taxi, captures that dynamic perfectly. The fear is real, the threat is not. and the only way to discover the difference is to face it. The Season 3 episode Bet to be Blonde, which aired on September 26, 2011, explores a different dimension of the same theme, one that has to do with conformity and the pressure to become someone you are not. Mordecai loses a bet to Rigby and has to dye his hair blonde. It is supposed to be a simple punishment, a cosmetic change, a joke. But after the dye job, Mordecai encounters a group of blonde men who welcome him into their circle with warmth and enthusiasm. They understand him, they say. They share his struggles. They make him feel like he belongs. The group turns out to be a cult. Their friendliness is a recruitment strategy, their acceptance is conditional, and their true nature is hostile toward anyone who does not look like them. Mordecai, seduced by the comfort of belonging, begins to drift away from Rigby. He spends more time with the blondes. He adopts their mannerisms, he starts to define himself by his hair color rather than by his character, and the more he conforms, the less of himself he retains. Rigby has to intervene. He has to fight to get his friend back, literally, from a group that has convinced Mordecai that identity is something you receive from a group rather than something you build from within. The episode is played as comedy, and it works as comedy. But the lesson underneath is one that every person encounters at some point in their life. There will always be groups that offer you belonging in exchange for conformity. There will always be communities that welcome you warmly and then gradually demand that you shed every part of yourself that does not match their template. The warmth is real, the welcome is genuine, and the cost is your identity. The lesson is not that belonging is bad. The lesson is that belonging that requires you to become someone else is not belonging at all. It is erasure dressed in the language of acceptance. The Season 2 episode Appreciation Day, which aired on December 13th, 2010, tackles honesty in a way that feels almost too direct for a show that usually wraps its lessons in supernatural chaos. In this episode, Benson tells Mordecai and Rigby about the Book of Park Records, a record of everything that has ever happened in the park, handed down from manager to manager since the park's founding. Benson tells Mordecai he can only write the truth, and the truth is that he does not appreciate them. This upsets Mordecai and Rigby, and in response, they do what they always do. They take the shortcut. They steal the book and rewrite it, fabricating records that paint them as model employees. They write that they are Benson's two favorite workers. They write that they wake up every morning and make blueberry pancakes and do the dishes and wash the floors. They write that Benson saves his hardest jobs for them and that they are always sweating from the labor. The lies are ridiculous. They are transparently false, and yet the Book of Park Records, being a magical artifact, makes them real. The written word becomes truth. The fabricated history overwrites reality, and the consequences spiral outward, as they always do until the lies threaten to consume everything. There is a straightforward moral here about the danger of dishonesty, about how lies compound and how one fabrication requires another and another, until the entire structure of deception becomes too heavy to maintain. But there is a subtler lesson too, one about narrative and the stories we tell about ourselves. Mordecai and Rigby do not just lie about their work ethic, they write a version of themselves that they wish were true. They create a fiction in which they are hardworking, appreciated, valued, and the fiction feels good. It feels better than reality. That is why lies are tempting, not because people enjoy deception, but because the false version of your life is often more comfortable than the real one. The problem is that comfort is not truth, and a life built on a comfortable lie is still a lie. The book has to be restored, the records have to be corrected, and Mordecai and Rigby have to accept that the only way to become the people they wish they were is not to rewrite the past, but to change the present, one honest day at a time. Regular Show also has a deeply considered relationship with the concept of mentorship, one that plays out through the dynamic between the younger characters and the older ones. Skips, as discussed, serves as a kind of silent mentor throughout the series, offering wisdom when asked and stepping in when the situation becomes genuinely dangerous. But the show is careful not to present mentorship as a one-way transaction. Skips learns from Mordecai and Rigby as much as they learn from him. He learns about technology, he learns about adaptation, he learns that competence in one domain does not guarantee competence in all domains, and that the willingness to be a beginner again is the highest form of the expertise he already possesses. Benson, too, functions as a reluctant mentor, though neither he nor Mordecai and Rigby would use that word. His lectures, his threats, his screaming red-faced demands that they do their jobs, these are not just expressions of anger. They are expressions of investment. He would not yell if he did not care. He would not threaten to fire them every week if he did not, on some level, want them to give him a reason not to. The road trip in Busted Cart makes this explicit. Benson cries because he is afraid of losing his job, But the fear behind the fear is that without the park, without the people in it, without the daily struggle of managing a group of people who seem determined to make his life impossible, he has nothing. The park is not just his workplace, it is his purpose. And the people in it, even the ones who drive him to the edge of a literal nuclear meltdown, are his family. Not the family he was born into, the one that taught him to yell. The family he chose, the one that teaches him, slowly, painfully, through years of conflict and reconciliation, that there are other ways to be heard. The show's Halloween specials, collectively titled Terror Tales of the Park, run across multiple seasons and offer a different kind of lesson, one about the stories we tell each other and the fears we share. In these episodes, the park crew gathers and tells horror stories, each one animated in a different style, each one reflecting the fears and preoccupations of the character who tells it. These are not just seasonal specials. They are character studies in disguise. The stories each character tells reveal what they are most afraid of, and those fears mirror the lessons the show has been teaching all along. Fear of being replaced, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing the people you love, fear of the world changing faster than you can adapt to it, fear of your own inadequacy. The Terror Tales episodes externalize these fears as literal monsters, which is what regular show has always done. But in these episodes, the mechanism is laid bare. The characters are telling stories about themselves. They just do not know it yet. The Season 3 episode Diary, which aired on July 16, 2012, offers another window into the show's exploration of boundaries and respect. Mordecai and Rigby accidentally break the lock on Margaret's diary while she is away on a weekend trip. They need to fix it before she returns. The temptation to read the diary is enormous. Margaret's private thoughts are right there, accessible, unguarded. And the show turns this into a genuine moral dilemma. Not a supernatural one, not an absurd one. A real one, the kind you face when you find someone's phone unlocked on the table, or when you overhear a conversation you were not meant to hear, or when you have access to information that was not meant for you. Margaret is absent for the entire episode. She does not know the diary was ever in danger. She does not know the lock was broken. She does not know that two people she trusts stood in her room with her innermost thoughts laid bare and accessible. And the fact that she never finds out is precisely the point. The test of character is not what you do when someone is watching. It is what you do when no one will ever know. The lesson is about the sanctity of privacy and the discipline required to respect it. Respecting someone's privacy is not a passive act. It is an active choice. It is the choice to not look when you could look, to not read when you could read, to not listen when you could listen. And that choice is difficult precisely because there is no external enforcement. No one would know if you read the diary. No magical consequence would descend. The only thing stopping you is your own integrity. And integrity, the show suggests, is the thing you have when no one is watching. It is the version of yourself that exists in the absence of an audience. It is who you are in the room alone with the unlocked diary. That is the test, not the big, dramatic, cosmic test. The small, quiet, private one, the one no one will ever know about except you. There is a related thread worth examining, one that the show weaves through its relationship with nostalgia and the specific cultural era it draws from. The Season 1 episode Prank Callers, the 9th episode, which aired on November 1st, 2010, sends Mordecai and Rigby back in time to 1982, after they attempt to contact a legendary prank caller. The year is not an accident. 1982 is the heart of the era that regular show aesthetically inhabits. The era of analog technology, of rotary phones and cassette tapes, and the kind of loose, unsupervised afternoons that shaped J.G. Quintel's childhood. When Mordecai and Rigby arrive in the past, they do not find paradise. They find a world that is alien to them. A world without the internet, without cell phones, without any of the tools they depend on. The past is not better, it is just different. And the longing for it, the belief that things were simpler or purer or more authentic before you were born, is exposed as a fantasy. Every era has its complications. Every decade has its struggles. The only time that actually belongs to you is the one you are living in right now. There is also something to be said about the way regular show treats time itself. Not as a plot device, but as a philosophical concept. The show is acutely aware that time is passing. The characters age. Their circumstances change. The park, which seems eternal in the early seasons, is revealed to be temporary. The relationships shift. People leave, people return different. The Season 4 premiere Exit 9B, which aired on October 1st, 2012, literalizes this by having the park raised to make way for a freeway. The physical space the characters have occupied is under threat of being erased, replaced by something utilitarian and forgettable. And the park crew has to fight to preserve it, not because the park is special in any objective sense, but because it is theirs. Because the time they spent there matters. Because erasing the place where you grew up is a kind of violence, even when the place was imperfect. Even when the place was just a park. Time in regular show is never neutral. It is always moving, always taking things away, always offering new things in their place. Mordecai's early seasons are defined by waiting, by the belief that time is infinite, that there will always be another chance to tell Margaret how he feels, another day to start painting, another morning to get serious about his career. And time, politely but firmly, proves him wrong. Margaret leaves, the chance passes, the window closes, and Mordecai learns the way all of us learn that the only time you can act is now. Not tomorrow, not when you are ready, not when the conditions are perfect. Now. Because now is the only moment that actually exists. The past is a story you tell yourself, and the future is a story you hope is true. And the present is the only space where anything real can happen. This understanding of time is what gives the finale its power. When the show jumps forward to show the characters 25 years later, it is not just an epilogue, it is a statement. Time passed. The characters used it, they grew. They built lives, they did not waste it worrying about whether they deserved to grow or whether they had earned the right to be happy. They just lived, day by day, year by year, one imperfect decision at a time. And the accumulation of all those imperfect decisions became a life, a real, full, beautiful, regular life. That is what time is for. Not for waiting, not for planning, not for regretting, for living, for doing the work even when the work is raking leaves. Even when the work is studying for a test you might fail, even when the work is sitting with your grief in a trailer in the park and fixing things until the pain becomes something you can carry rather than something that carries you. Regular Show is also quietly brilliant in the way it handles the concept of identity through its character designs. These are not humans. They are a blue jay, a raccoon, a gumball machine, a yeti, a lollipop man, a ghost, a green-skinned man of indeterminate species. The show never explains why the world is populated by such diverse and surreal beings. It never establishes rules for what species exist or how they interact or why a bird and a raccoon are best friends or why a ghost works as a groundskeeper. It never has to. Because the diversity of forms is the point. It says, without ever stating it directly, that what you look like does not determine who you are. A gumball machine can manage a park with integrity and passion. A raccoon can earn a diploma and raise a family. A lollipop man can save the universe through the sheer force of his gentleness. Identity is not about form. It is not about species or appearance or any of the categories the world uses to sort you before you have had a chance to define yourself. Identity is about choice. It is about what you do, not what you are. A gumball machine chooses to care about his employees even when they make his life impossible. A raccoon chooses to go back to school at 25. A blue jay chooses to pick up a paintbrush after years of letting his talent atrophy. An immortal yeti chooses to keep skipping every day for centuries because a woman he loved once made it mean something. A ghost chooses to wait 4 years for a postcard and a promise. A green-skinned man chooses to be himself in front of the woman he loves rather than performing a version of himself he thinks she deserves. Every character's identity is forged in the choosing, not in the being. And the show embodies this principle so naturally that you forget it is making a statement at all. This is reinforced through the arc of Thomas, the GOAT intern, who appears in the Season 4 premiere Exit 9B, which aired on October 1st, 2012. Thomas is hired as the park's intern, and for 2 full seasons he exists in the background, a mild, unremarkable presence who the other characters barely notice. He attends meetings, he does small tasks, he answers his phone and talks to his mother. He is, in every visible way, exactly what he appears to be. An ordinary person doing ordinary work in an extraordinary place. And then the Season 6 special, The Real Thomas, reveals that none of it was real. Thomas is not Thomas. He is Nikolai, a Russian spy. His mother is not his mother, but a handler from a Russian intelligence organization called MOMM, the Ministry of Mental Management. Every phone call, every casual interaction, every seemingly innocent moment was part of an operation. Thomas has been lying to everyone in the park since the day he arrived. His identity, the one they accepted, the one they welcomed, was a fiction, a performance. A cover story layered so perfectly over a real person that even the audience could not see through it. But when the moment of truth arrives, when Thomas has to choose between his mission and his friends, he chooses his friends. He double-crosses his handlers. He saves the park crew. And then he disappears into hiding, giving up everything, his cover, his safety, his connection to the organization that shaped him. Because the relationships he built at the park, even the ones built on lies, became more real to him than the mission he was assigned. That arc carries a lesson that is easy to miss because the spy thriller elements are so entertaining. Thomas spent 2 seasons as a background character, the kind of person you would not notice at a party, the kind of person whose name you might forget by the time the conversation moves on. And the revelation that he was a spy reframes every interaction the audience witnessed, every casual lunch, every quiet moment standing at the edge of a group scene. It asks you to reconsider the people in your own life who seem unremarkable. What are they carrying that you cannot see? What missions are running beneath their surfaces? What choices are they silently making while you look past them toward the louder or more visible people in the room? The lesson is that you are not defined by the role you were given. You are not bound by the expectations placed on you by the institution that raised you, or the system that trained you, or the family that named you. At any point, at any moment, no matter how deeply embedded you are in a predetermined path, you can choose differently. You can choose loyalty to the people who earned it rather than the people who demanded it. Thomas loses everything when he makes that choice. He loses his name, he loses his safety, he loses his place in the world, but he gains the knowledge that when it mattered, when the choice was between obedience and integrity, he chose integrity, and that knowledge, Regular Show argues, is worth more than any cover story. It is worth more than any mission. It is worth more than the comfortable lie of a life lived according to someone else's plan. There is a lesson the show teaches about the nature of everyday routine that often goes unacknowledged but sits beneath every episode like the foundation of a house. The park operates on routine. Every day the same tasks need to be completed, the lawn needs to be mowed. The fountain needs to be cleaned, the chairs need to be set up, the trash needs to be collected. There is nothing glamorous about any of it. There is nothing heroic about picking up litter or trimming hedges or making sure the birthday party has enough folding chairs. And yet the show returns to these tasks episode after episode, season after season, not because it has run out of ideas, but because it understands something fundamental about the way most lives are actually lived. Most of your life will be routine. Most of your days will look like the day before. And this is not a failure of your life. This is the shape of all lives, everywhere, across every era and every culture. In every economic bracket, you will wake up. You will go to work. You will do tasks that no one will remember by tomorrow. You will come home. You will eat dinner. You will go to sleep. And you will do it again and again and again. And the temptation, the one Mordecai and Rigby face in every episode, is to see this routine as meaningless. To see it as something to be escaped rather than something to be inhabited. To see the ordinary as the enemy of the extraordinary, as if the only way to have a meaningful life is to have a dramatic one. Regular Show rejects that idea completely. The routine is not the enemy, the routine is the soil. It is where everything grows. Rigby's growth happens in the routine, in the daily act of showing up to school, in the nightly act of studying, in the repeated choice to do the thing rather than avoid it. Mordecai's growth happens in the routine too, though he takes longer to see it. In the daily act of going to work, in the slow accumulation of skill and self-knowledge that eventually allows him to leave the park and become an artist. Even Benson's growth is rooted in routine. In the daily act of managing, in the repeated choice to care about something, to invest in something, to show up at a place every morning and try to make it better than it was yesterday. The extraordinary events, the supernatural escalations, the battles with death and the journeys to other dimensions, and the time travel and the magical keyboards, these are not the things that change the characters. They are the things that reveal what the characters have already become through the accumulation of ordinary days. The crisis does not create the hero. The routine does. The hero is forged in the thousands of unremarkable moments that precede the remarkable one. And when the remarkable moment arrives, the hero does not suddenly become someone new. They simply reveal who they have been becoming all along, one regular day at a time. The show's use of music reinforces this philosophy in ways that are easy to overlook. Regular Show is saturated with 1980s rock and synth, a deliberate choice by J.G. Quintel, who grew up listening to that era's music and integrated it into the show's DNA. The soundtrack is not just aesthetic, it is thematic. The 1980s, culturally, were defined by a tension between excess and authenticity, between the synthetic and the genuine, between the performative and the real. Regular Show lives in that tension. Its characters perform versions of themselves, then gradually learn to be themselves. The music, with its soaring synthesizers and earnest guitar work, captures both the grandeur of performance and the intimacy of sincerity. It sounds like what growing up feels like. Big and dramatic from the inside, small and ordinary from the outside. The finale's use of David Bowie's Heroes as the backdrop for the montage of the characters' future lives is the show's ultimate musical statement. Bowie, who spent his career exploring identity and transformation, who wore masks and shed them and became someone new with every album, is the perfect sonic companion for a show about people who spend years figuring out who they are. The song plays over images of ordinary life: children being born, art being made, parks being maintained, food being shared, the mundane made sacred by the simple act of paying attention to it. That is what heroes do. Not slay dragons, not save universes. They live, fully, honestly, with the courage to be ordinary in a world that tells them ordinary is not enough. There is one more lesson that regular show teaches, and it is the one that ties everything else together. It is the lesson that gives the show its name. The lesson is that a regular life is not a lesser life. A regular day is not a wasted day. A regular person is not a failed person. The word regular has been used as an insult for so long that we have forgotten what it actually means. It means consistent. It means present. It means showing up again and again, day after day, without the guarantee of applause or recognition or reward. It means doing the work even when the work is invisible. It means loving people even when they are difficult. It means growing even when no one notices. It means being alive in the fullest sense of the word, not because your life is spectacular, but because it is yours. That is what Mordecai learns when he finally picks up a paintbrush. That is what Rigby learns when he stands on the graduation stage. That is what Benson learns when he stops yelling long enough to cry. That is what Skips learned centuries ago, on the day he started skipping. That is what Pops knew all along from the very beginning. From the moment he first said jolly good show, a regular show, a regular life, a regular miracle happening right now to you, whether you notice it or not. Regular show does not end with a lesson. It ends with a feeling. The feeling of sitting in a room with people you have known for so long that their presence is indistinguishable from your own heartbeat. The feeling of looking at a statue of someone who gave everything so that you could have ordinary days. The feeling of being alive right now in this moment with all the mess and all the beauty and all the unfinished business of being a person in a world that does not slow down to let you catch up. That feeling is what the show leaves you with. Not a conclusion, not a thesis, a feeling. And feelings, the show has spent 8 seasons arguing, are the only things worth trusting. The show ran for 8 seasons and 244 episodes, spanning from September 6th, 2010 to January 16th, 2017. It won a Primetime Emmy Award for Excellent. It was nominated for 7 Annie Awards and 3 British Academy Children's Awards. It launched the career of J.G. Quintel, who went on to create Close Enough for HBO Max, a show that continued many of the same themes for an explicitly adult audience. Regular show has been available on multiple streaming platforms and continues to find new audiences, young people who discover it the way so many discovered it originally. By stumbling onto an episode where 2 guys try to avoid raking leaves and somehow end up battling a demon from another dimension, and thinking that is pretty funny, and not realizing until years later that the show was teaching them something the entire time. But the awards and the accolades and the streaming numbers are not why regular show matters. Regular show matters because it told the truth. It told the truth about what it is like to be alive during the messy, confusing, frightening, beautiful, occasionally absurd period between who you were and who you are going to become. It told the truth about work, about how work is boring and necessary, and sometimes the most meaningful thing you can do with your day, even when it does not feel meaningful while you are doing it. It told the truth about love, about how love is not a prize you earn by being the right person, it is a practice you engage in by being honest about the person you actually are. It told the truth about friendship, about how friendship survives betrayal not through forgiveness alone, but through the daily, unglamorous choice to keep showing up. It told the truth about loss, about how loss does not make you stronger, it makes you different, and the difference can become a gift if you let it. It told the truth about growing up, about the fact that growing up does not happen all at once, and that it does not feel heroic while it is happening, and that most of the time it just feels like sitting in a classroom you thought you were done with, or standing in front of a painting you are not sure is any good, or holding a friend's hand in a hospital room and hoping that a stupid hat will be enough to bring them back. On September 6, 2010, a Blue Jay named a stolen keyboard the Power, and he and his best friend were launched to the edge of the universe. And neither of them knew that the real journey was the one that would take them 7 years and 244 episodes to complete. The journey from who they were to who they were going to become. From slackers to fathers. From boys to men. From people who could not set up chairs to people who could save the universe, not through power or violence or magical shortcuts, but through the slow, painful, beautiful, ordinary act of growing up. On January 16, 2017, a lollipop man hugged his brother into a star and broke a cycle that had lasted since the beginning of time. In between those two moments, a show that pretended to be about nothing quietly became a show about everything. About the terrifying, necessary, unavoidable work of becoming a person. About the fact that you have to do it anyway. About the fact that the people around you are doing it too, and they are just as scared as you are, and the kindest thing you can do for them, the most life-changing lesson you can offer, is to be honest about that. To say, I do not have it figured out either. To say, I am trying. To say, I am still here. And if any of this meant something to you tonight, leaving a like and subscribing is the simplest way to make sure we get to keep doing this. Take care of yourselves and get some rest. You have earned it.